Hi, I'm Jo Looby. I'm the Global Head of Innovation on Bailey's. I'm delighted to be here today to tell a little bit about the repositioning story on the Bailey's brand and the role innovation plays in setting this much-loved Irish brand up for success into the future.
Thanks a million. I thought you were calling me the 80-year-old person from Bailey's there for a second. But yeah, thanks a million. It's lovely to be on this stage. I haven't been here since 2003 when I graduated. And I guess I'm here today to tell you a story about Bailey's. And I wouldn't blame you for kind of sitting there saying, Bailey's, we know it, it's an Irish icon. Wouldn't put it up there with the top innovative brands I could think of right now. And my role is the head of global innovation. And I'm not really going to convince you it's the most innovative brand you've ever heard of either today. But what I do want to tell you is a story about a brand that is on a real transformation curve. And I want to tell you a little bit about how we're using innovation strategically to help set the brand up for the future. So hopefully we'll give you a little bit of food for thought. I hope there is a break coming up, because once my slides come on here, you'll see one of the health hazards of working on Bailey's, particularly with the new brand positioning, in that it all just looks so yummy. It absolutely encourages people to overly indulge and overly have a treat. So I will apologize for that at the outset. So I could probably just put up this chart about Bailey's and then just go home, because in a way it really says all that I came to say here today, which is that on Bailey's we've been on a journey to turn it from something that you may have a little tipple of with your granny on Christmas Eve into something which we call a grown-up real treat. Something that is as versatile in a freak shake as it is in a hot chocolate, as it is poured over a brownie. Something that is made of cream and whiskey and vanilla and chocolate. It's just absolutely delectable and a little bit naughty. And hopefully after this, that is how you will describe Bailey's, and less about it being your granny's favorite tipple on Christmas Eve. So let me tell you a little bit about the story of Bailey's, probably not as eloquently as your speaker last year did. But Bailey's in itself is a story about innovation, actually. It was conceived in the 1970s when arguably Ireland was a very different place. The economy was far from booming. Pride in Irish exports and Irish produce was certainly not what it is today. And it was at a time where women in particular were becoming really important consumers in alcohol, but there was no choice for them. Women sat in the lounges while men sat in the bars. So there became this brilliant innovation opportunity which Bailey's set out to actually fill. And in filling that opportunity, it looked at two of the great stalwarts of Ireland, our agricultural industry, our dairy cream production, and our heritage in distilling and whiskey. And remember, the Irish were the first to actually distill whiskey, and not the Scots. So by bringing those two wonderful Irish traditions together in a moment when the economy needed it and when women needed it, we came upon, I guess, the idea for Bailey's, created specifically for women, as I said, at a time when there wasn't that much choice. And we've absolutely been kind of unashamedly supporting a female target on Bailey's ever since. Now, like all good innovations, and I know this one only too well, it can take a lot of time to perfect, actually. So there was definitely a sense that mixing Irish dairy cream and whiskey shouldn't work. And it didn't work for quite a long time. It actually took about 3 years to perfect the recipe. But when it did, something truly disruptive was actually born. Something that was creating a new category. So an Irish cream liqueur didn't exist before Bailey's was invented, and really filled that space for women in this country. And it was a great story. It was a great story of successful brand building and of growth, actually, from the 1970s right up until recession began to hit around 2009. So there's a pretty big stagger in the chart on the screen right now. And I guess one of the big issues that we've had on the Baileys brand in more recent years is that alcohol, and indeed Baileys, suffered terribly from the global recession and really struggled, as you can see, across 2010, 11, 12, 13, to actually find its feet and get back into a growth type scenario. And I guess our response to that at Diageo was to call a bit of a crisis. And we called a crisis by saying there is something wrong that Baileys hasn't bounced back in the way a lot of other industries did. And it's time to take a look and ask ourselves a really important strategic question. Is Baileys the product, or is Baileys the brand out of fashion and out of date? And in order to unpick that question and understand what the issue was, we went right back to some fundamental truths about Baileys. And the first, I think, fundamental truth that we went back to and we still hold on to today is this sense that actually people love Baileys. If somebody presents you with one after dinner, hopefully your immediate instinct is to say, yum, kind of forgot it was that nice. And that's kind of the problem, really, which is that when people are given a Baileys, they really love it. It is claimed to be, by Kantar, the world's most loved spirit, with 150 million people saying, yeah, I like Baileys. The only problem is they don't think to drink Baileys. And that, therefore, became one of the big marketing challenges that we needed to think about overcoming. The next thing that we relied upon in recreating and repositioning Baileys was the product truth. And we, I guess, decode what's in your bottle of Baileys in quite a simple way, as you can see on the chart. We see it as being part booze, but part cake. And that gives you something that is truly pleasurable, delicious, and indulgent. And that therefore means that we think of ourselves not as an alcohol, certainly not as a cream liqueur, and we think of ourselves more like a treat, and a real treat at that. And when we look at the world of treating, we get really excited, actually. We don't need to tell you that there's been a riotous explosion of treats. You only need to have a look at how many new donut shops open in Dublin to know that treating is interesting, it's fun, it's irreverent. You only need to look at the fact that 9 out of the top 10 TV slots in the UK last year were actually filled by the Great British Bake Off to know that people are interested in the world of treat. It is colourful, it is light-hearted, it is really imaginative. Anything goes in this space. And where else would you get a relatively serious brand presentation with unicorn poop on a chart? But that is the type of treats that people are desiring and are looking for today. And we believe that if we can reinvent Baileys within this space, that is how we set ourselves up for the future. So I guess like any good brand and like any positioning, you need to make sure that what you're aspiring to be and the direction that you're traveling in is very much supported by your consumer, that they share a perspective, that they share an insight with you. And we have uncovered what we believe is a really powerful, a really potent even, consumer insight on Baileys that looks at modern women, looks at modern people really, and actually says, life is hard and boring enough. And there are just moments when you just want to say, hell yeah, I'll have the dessert, I'll give in, I'll indulge. And this is the same type of insight into people who live busy, stressful lives that sees people doing things like queuing around the corner to buy tickets for Harry Potter the musical or going to the Nightmare Realm tonight before Halloween. These are the types of behaviors and insights that we know people are embarking on where they kind of say, being grown up is just a little bit boring. Let's embrace the moments that we have that are a little bit more playful and a little bit more inventive. And that is, as I said, the insight that we're very much pursuing on Baileys. So I'm not sure if today you've had anyone who's spoken to you a lot about things like brand purpose, reasons that brands exist in the world, etc. I'm sure if you haven't had a lot of that conversation today, you've had it in many a lecture hall. And we at Diageo and on the brands that I've worked on in my career absolutely believe in building brands that mean something, that have a role, that know what they stand for. But again, that doesn't need to be too lofty. It doesn't need to be too serious. And the more real it is and the closer to your product it is, the better I think it is, actually. So on Bailey's, we believe that we exist to be your co-conspirator, to be your friend that gives you the nudge that says, go on. And we want to be that co-conspirator in the pursuit of pleasure, giving you billions of reasons to just say, hell yeah, I'll have the treat. So that's kind of what we're about today. And we're about taking things that were conventions and flipping them on their head. And in a way, Bailey's in itself was a bit of a convention that we're trying to flip on its head. As I say, your granny's Christmas Eve drink. So everything that we try to do now is to take things that you see in one specific way and give them a playful adult flip. So is coffee only for the morning? Certainly not, when you put a Bailey's in there. Does health food have to be boring? Certainly not, with a Bailey's option. Is vanilla ice cream one of the dullest treats you can think of? Certainly not, if you just pour a little Bailey's over the top. So everything that we do is nudging and prompting consumers to think about what was, in its day, in the 70s, an innovative Irish cream liqueur, but to think about it now as a real treat and another amazing offering in your treating landscape. So I guess the three things that underpin what we're doing on the brand right now is resetting ourselves in this business of real treats, remembering that we have a drinker base to die for, and just thinking about billions of ways, billions of triggers that we can encourage a little more people to have a little more Baileys at more times across a year. And that is it in a nutshell. So when you go through a brand repositioning in the way that we've been through a brand repositioning on Bailey's in the last 3 years or so, the next thing you need to do is make sure it doesn't just live in the nice PowerPoint slide that sits on my desk, but actually you bring it to consumers in a way that is really compelling and that you have a creative idea and a content ambition that releases everything I've just been saying and puts it on TVs and puts it on screens. And one of the things that has been really powerful for us as we've unlocked bringing this world of real treats to life for consumers has been to think about a content ambition. And we define our content ambition as wanting to playfully reimagine Bailey's, but do it in a way that it is just so compelling and so delicious. It makes people want to reach out and lick the screen. I realize that sounds a little bit disgusting, and I don't want anybody to jump up here and lick the screen. But what we have tried to do, therefore, with all of our work on Bailey's, is create something that you just want to give into and indulge in. A real trigger to treat and consider a Bailey's. So I'm just going to show you 3 pieces of content. Some are kind of more TV advertising style, others are more recipe video style, and we'll see if you've got the urge to lick the screen at the end of them all.
No glasses. No problem. Your sacrifices will not be forgotten.
Don't be afraid to get creative this Christmas. Don't mind if I Baileys. Delish.
I mean, camping is great. Totally. But you know what? This is even better.
I do miss that campfire smell, though.
There's a candle for that.
Don't underestimate the great indoors.
So a few examples there from around the globe, as you can hear the American accents in some of the s'mores ones. But hopefully that kind of brings to life the world that we're trying to create for Bailey's through some of the content. So I guess this presentation is about innovation in action, and that is what I do every day. And what I do is innovation in terms of product innovation. And the way I would describe how we now deploy new Bailey's products into the world is by making sure that they are the cherry on the top. And I guess what I mean by that is, and sometimes this makes me feel absolutely like the least creative innovator in the whole country, but everything that we actually do when we add new products and we add new innovations into Bailey's world is we make sure that we're only bringing those products in if they're accessing an opportunity or they're overcoming a problem that Bailey's, the original Irish cream, and our marketing can't overcome or cannot solve. So for us, it's really important that our core in that Bailey's original that you've seen so versatilely described in the films today, we want to make sure that core is really strong. But if we find incremental ways to grow our business through new products and innovation, we'll do that, but only if they can be a cherry on the top. And I guess the other kind of mantra that I have is that we would only introduce something new into the Bailey's family and the Bailey's range if we were really clear about the role that it was actually playing and what it was delivering to us. And I have kind of 3 ways that we think about innovation and the role that innovation plays. And then I'll show you some of the products that we have around the world which actually support those roles and are really adding into our business. So the one thing I'll just remind you of before we actually go into this is that Bailey's is quite unique. In that it is a real treat, it is indulgent, it is delicious. But I'm not going to try and convince anybody that it should be a drink that they stick with all night or that they should try in coppers. There are absolutely, I guess, limited occasions where you would enjoy a Bailey's. And what that means is that you need to have what we call a penetration model. You need to bring a lot of people into the Bailey's family because you know that their frequency of consumption is not going to be massive compared to other brands you might name. So one of the other brands in the company I work for, Diageo, is Smirnoff. And Smirnoff know that if they recruit one person, obviously that person will find multiple moments and multiple times to order a Smirnoff over the course of a month or a night or whatever it is. Bailey's has to bring 3 people into the Bailey's family for every one person Smirnoff might bring into their family, just because we don't and we can't and we shouldn't have that frequency. So when we look to innovate, we only do so where we are sure that we are bringing people into our family, and people that wouldn't come unless we actually stretched our brand and we moved into more innovative spaces. So as you can imagine, I normally say no more than yes to a lot of the innovation ideas because that is a really strong strategic parameter for us. So when we look at our innovations, we always ask ourselves the question, are they re-recruiting, are they recruiting, or are they disrupting? I'll go through each of those and give you an example. So the left-hand side of our innovation strategy is all about re-recruiting people into the Bailey's brand. And what we mean by that is, actually, it is people who were probably in our family at one point or another, but we haven't given them a trigger and we haven't been relevant to them in quite a long time. So is there something we would lean on in innovation that can give them a nudge, can give them a shake-up? And I'll take you through the example of how we do that with a limited time offer called Strawberries and Cream in just a second. But where we are really excited is in the middle bucket. which is where we recruit new consumers into our family. And we always ask ourselves the question, are there groups of consumers in the world or in specific markets who just won't come to Bailey's the way it is? How do we need to flex what we are to make sure we encourage those consumers in? And that is when we innovate and do things like Bailey's Almond, which is an almond milk drink from Bailey's, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. But very importantly, it is bringing people into the brand who wouldn't come if we didn't have an innovation available for them. And then the final pillar that I'll talk about is what we call the disrupt pillar. And that's the really liberating, freer zone whereby we think about ourselves not stuck in an alcohol or a cream liqueur category, but we think about ourselves operating more in the world of treats. And like brands like M&M's and Magnum, we look to those brands for our sources of inspiration. I'll tell you a little bit about how we do that in just a second as well. So, firstly, I'll go back. Firstly, to look at our re-recruit pillar. So, we have an issue on Bailey's. We have a lot of issues, but one of our issues is that we are very seasonal. Most of our consumption is around Christmas time, a little bit at Easter. You can conceive a bit of it at this time of the year when the evenings get darker. But what is going to motivate somebody to choose a Bailey's in spring or in summer? And we found that actually our marketing and our original Irish cream offering wasn't enough to actually break through and entice people into our treat brand in those times of the year. And therefore, under our re-recruit banner, we said we need to do something a little bit different. So we have brought out a limited time offer, which is a Bailey's Strawberries and Cream. That launched in the US last year for Valentine's Day. It launched in GB around Wimbledon time. So what was really important about landing in a new offering from Bailey's was that you had the cultural context going on. It was the time of, flowers and chocolates and pink ribbons. And indeed in GB, when we launched this for Wimbledon, should I say, obviously it was kind of synonymous with the cultural moment at the time as well. And what you do in those instances is you go and you talk to the major retailers like Asda, for example, and if you go and talk to them and say, I think Bailey's should have a big display in the front of your store in July, they'll say, are you kidding? But if you bring Bailey's Strawberries and Cream and tell them to put it beside the barbecues and the fresh strawberries and the fresh cream, it then has a reason to be. And it disrupts you when you're pushing your trolley through that Asda store and makes you think to drink Bailey's in an incremental moment, in an incremental occasion. And that is when innovation can really be a cherry on top that can help grow your business. We won't allow something like Strawberries and Cream sit around. It's only here for, what do they say, a good time, not a long time. A little bit like the Cadbury's Cream Egg, we'll bring it back again next year. But it is playing a really important strategic role for us in bringing people into the brand who wouldn't have thought of us at that particular moment. And let's take a look at some of the content that supports Strawberries and Cream right now. I told you you would be hungry. This chart looks a little bit funny because there's some videos missing, so it'll be revealed in a second. So moving on to the next strategic role for innovation that I wanted to talk about, where we recruit, where we bring new people into our brand who wouldn't have come before. One of the innovations that we deploy in the US are these little perfect one treat size Baileys. We'll show you some content in a minute so you can just see how small they really are. They're just your single portion. And the reason that we actually launched this format innovation was, again, back to a specific issue that we uncovered. And that issue was that you might buy the bottle of Bailey's before Christmas, and by March it's right in at the back of the cupboard. And when you are dealing with a product that has that creamy consistency, even though it doesn't need to be kept in the fridge and it has a good shelf life, there can be perceptions that it's not as fresh and delicious if you come upon it in the back of of the cupboard 3 or 6 months later. And also, if we think about ourselves occupying a category that is nearly outside of alcohol, we need to think like a treat. You don't just buy your favorite chocolate bar in one size. You'll have family size and minis and multi-packs and the whole shebang. And they're designed that way so that they are right there at your fingertips when you impulsively choose to have a treat. And we need to show up more like that as Baileys. And that is what these one treat size Baileys minis are designed to do. So we know that one of our key occasions on the brand is when you have that appointment with the sofa. And when you leave the sofa and you go have a look in the cupboard or the fridge for the treat you'll have in that moment, you're never going to find that big bottle of Baileys that's shoved in the back of another cupboard. But if you can be prompted and reminded by the format that we've innovated into, we can give you that trigger to consume that we have been missing all along. So let's just show a couple of these. Are just tiny little pieces of content.
Ooh. Ooh.
But again, they really live that idea of treat and treat strategy. And I realize this is not a very strategic thing to say, but they're just so cute. You really have to taste them. So one of our other examples in that kind of middle pillar of the innovation strategy, which is all about recruiting, is one of our newer innovations, which is available here in Ireland, which is called Baileys Almond. And you might look at this and go, how did Baileys decide to actually bring something out that didn't even actually have dairy cream in it? And yes, that was quite a conversation. But I guess ultimately, we were really clear that what we bring to consumers is indulgence. And we know that if people have specific health needs or they choose to live specific lifestyles, they don't want to be devoid of indulgence. And we can bring our brand of indulgence to them on their terms and therefore make our brand much more accessible. So Baileys Almond is a dairy-free, gluten-free, vegan-friendly version of Baileys. And back to my point from earlier on, there would be no way that people who are dairy-free or choose to live a dairy-free life at certain times, there would be no way we could invite them into the Baileys family with just Baileys Original as our offering. So by innovating in a product landscape and bringing our brand of indulgence to consumers on their terms, we're really clear that we're penetrating, we're adding consumers into that family who would not have come before if we hadn't flexed what we are as a brand. This brings people who are younger, who are more affluent, who are more urban into our brand and actually helps sustain us into the future. So it's really important that we go back to what we really are, loosen some of those shackles, and bring our brand of indulgence to consumers on their terms. And then final example for me, which is where you can use innovation. This is less of a product innovation story, actually, but where you can think very disruptively about what you are as a brand and the category that you occupy. So, as I said a few times, we don't see ourselves as just an alcohol or just a cream liqueur. We see ourselves as a treat. And therefore, we look to brands like M&M's and Magnum and Nutella. And where a lot of those brands are deriving revenue streams right now is from the explosion of the experience economy in treats, from Nutella cafes and Magnum pleasure stores. The M&M store in Leicester Square in London does 10% of all of the M&M sales in the entire country. And that's just through one destination store. So experience and that kind of sense of sensory experience around treats is really interesting. And we're beginning to think about how we can drive revenue from that experiential notion. It's something that we trialed right here in Dublin nearly a year ago, where we took over Eat Yard, which I'm sure many of you have been to at the back of the George Bernard Shaw, and turned it into Treat Yard for a weekend. And what that allowed us to do was take that Baileys treat strategy from the PowerPoint slide into real life, but really proved that people will pay for these delicious treats with Baileys. And therefore, it gave us an opportunity to think more disruptive about where Baileys might win, more disruptively, should I say, about where Baileys might win into the future. We'll just show you a little video of how all that went. So, I'm about to leave you. I hope you are hungry now. So just finally, has any of this worked, or is any of this working? I guess the really good news is that it is. So since we embarked on this journey to reposition Baileys as a treat about 3 years ago, we've begun to turn that tide. Baileys is still not as big as it was before recession hit, but we should get there this year, actually. And we really feel that we're building up the next horizon, I guess, for the brand with this strategy. So that's it for me. I hope I have shown you how innovation can be in action in product terms, at least, on one of Ireland's most iconic brands. And I hope you feel that you'll all have a Baileys tonight as a result of it. Thanks a million.